Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Parleh Show presented by Bet99. I'm Vartanian, filling in for our main man, Bobby Conway. He's on vacation. He will be back next week. My co-host today, as always, is the one, the only former NHLer, our betting guru over at Bet99, Matthew Barnaby. Barney, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's a beautiful day here in Ottawa. So right after the show, hitting the links, hopefully going to make some cash today. It was a good day yesterday, but we had a little rain at the end. So we normally do a chip off the 18th deck, and everyone bets. We actually got into throwing paper airplanes, and who could throw it the furthest would cash in. It's I'd never seen it at a golf club before, but if there's gambling, we will find a way.
Barney, ever told you this? But you're living the life, man. You're living the life I want to live.
I'm also 30 years older than you, so
yes,
in 30 years you'll be living that life as well, buddy.
That's great, Barney. I'm happy you're having a great time. Let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights, who are probably still having a great time after winning the Stanley Cup, the first in franchise history. Just 6 seasons. That's all it took to get them there. On to Game 5. It was just complete dominance. 9-3? 9-4, 9-3 to win a Stanley Cup. It's an incredible run that this team put together.
Well, it was nice not to have to sweat that one out. It was just a dominating performance. And I think it was Marchessault that scored. No, it was Mark Stone that scored at one point.
Yeah.
And you could just tell they won the game. And he knew that they won the Stanley Cup and couldn't be happier for him, the whole management team. It's just been a well-oiled machine, helped by the NHL and expansion the way it should. When you're spending, $650 million to $1 billion on a franchise, you shouldn't have to suffer like the 92 or 93 Ottawa Senators did in teams in the past. Give them a team that can compete, and they took advantage of all the rules. I mean, absolutely all of the rules, but good for them. They said it would never work in Vegas a long time ago, and the first ever sports team in Vegas, professionally, a hockey team, nonetheless, wins the first championship. I can't even imagine what that cup looks like now. I would not want to be drinking out of it.
Listen, these expansion teams need help. If you look at the Thrashers, even Columbus, it wasn't the same situation. And people will be like, well, they had, they were able to get some good players. If you go look at that, the first roster that the Vegas Golden Knights had, no one was saying this is a Stanley Cup contending team. No one said that. It's easy to say it now, but that's after Bill Foley, George McPhee. They made all these fantastic moves to bring in the right players. And we'll talk about that because I think what they've done so far in a short amount of time is spectacular. But what I do want to touch on for both the Panthers and the Golden Knights, okay, they have a ton of skill. They've got speed. They got goal scorers. But it's the physicality on both sides. Both teams have that in common. I think Vegas more than Florida. But do you think, is that still, even in 2023, the recipe to win a cup is to have big, physical, hulking players?
Well, I think I've said it many a times, and I will continue to reiterate it. No other sport changes from the regular season to the postseason like hockey in the NHL. You need skill. You need a good goaltender. You need all of those things. But yes, you need grit. You need physicality, and you need guys that are going to play through pain and do anything to win a cup. And that's blocking shots. That's being physical. You don't have to run around. I think Florida got a little bit out of their element, trying to make it too tough a series and probably went a little above and beyond. But Vegas is a very skilled team, and they did not shy away one bit from the physicality. The main thing is playing that physicality in between the whistles, which they did to perfection. But yeah, I want a big team. I want a strong team. I want a skilled team. You can be the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, here in Toronto, obviously they've gone for skill for quite a long time under Kyle Dubas. It really just hasn't worked out. You can have all the skill in the world, but you need guys who can hit. You need 4 lines rolling, essentially, and that's what Vegas did because every single series, it was a different line that was producing. This Vegas team is phenomenal. You talked about injuries. I mean, what Paul Maurice said about Matthew Tkachuk and Aaron Ekblad, I'll just reiterate. Tkachuk, broken sternum in Game 3, still played Game 4. Aaron Ekblad, broken foot in the Boston series, 2 shoulder dislocations, torn oblique, and the guy was still averaging 23 minutes of ice time. So, I mean, credit to those guys. But for you, when you played, did you have to play through a serious injury, or did you know anybody else who played through maybe a serious injury and you're trying to figure out how is this happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I in the Montreal series back in '98 when we swept them, it was our first round. I separated my shoulder in Game 2, and I remember, after the game, just being in excruciating pain, and it would pop in, pop out, and literally would feel like it was hanging by your ankle. and you'd go home, you'd ice it back to the hotel, whether you're on the road or at home, ice it all night long. You'd get up the next day, you wouldn't practice because you couldn't practice. And then the next day they'd shoot you up with cortisone and you wouldn't feel anything. Your shoulder felt like the $6 million man getting a new part put into your body. So you'd play through it and you'd go through that till you were knocked out. And I've seen guys play with broken feet and broken hands and separated shoulders, all of the above. It's what you do. It's kind of masochistic. It's ingrained in you. You've seen it since we've been kids and we've heard about the injuries. To play with a broken sternum is a new level of tough. I've had a broken sternum and I couldn't breathe for 3 weeks. I couldn't take a deep breath. And I remember being at home and our coach at the time and general manager and doctor saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. We've done the x-rays." Well, 3 weeks later, we went back in and we could see the crack right in the middle. And I don't know how he even skated. I really don't know how he played. And in one of those games, he played really, really well. But in the end, you could just tell it wasn't Matthew Tkachuk at 100%. And I'm just glad he didn't play in that last game. It wouldn't have made a difference. Could have got hurt worse. But that's what we're in grade to do. And it's amazing to see. It's kind of one of those things when you win a cup, we wait to hear about all the injuries because they're just plenty.
Yeah, and listen, there was a report that his brother Brady had to help him out of bed and help him put his equipment on. I mean, if that was me or just a regular human walking the street, not even suit up for a game, you wouldn't be able to get out of bed. But it's so hard for. Go ahead.
I'd be more surprised that Matthew wasn't trying to help Brady get out of the bed from a hangover the next day.
Probably.
And
big
and his dad.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So I try and understand what you guys put yourselves through and how do you, but like as a player, I mean, how do you get your mind right to think, listen, I have this severe injury that can probably get worse if I don't take care of it, but I need to be out there and play with my team. How do you get to that point?
Well, it's funny you say that because yesterday I woke up and I scrolled through TikTok and whatever, and I saw our other ambassador, George St. Pierre, and he was just talking about a cold tub. Now, it's not the same thing as playing through a broken sternum, or certainly he's played with a lot of pain in his sport that he does, probably more than we do. It's mind over matter. It's really just sometimes almost tricking yourself and trying to focus on something else. And the focus is, how do I get through this? How do I manage the pain? How do I focus on something else? And that's the game. It's your teammates, and try to really take away that thinking away of pain. And that's the only way to get through it, is to take your mind to somewhere else. And I used to say when I'd play, Matthew Barnaby off the ice is much different than Matthew Barnaby on the ice. I took on a persona. And once I walked into that rink or onto that ice, I became a totally different person because I couldn't be nice Matthew Barnaby the way that I played. I couldn't have friends on the other team the way that I played. So I went to a whole different spot. And I think George St. Pierre, said it. Just focus on something else. Say it's going to be the worst 2 minutes of your life when you jump into this cold tub. But then when you get in there, you say, okay, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And it's kind of the same thing through injuries, but much more difficult.
Yeah. So a lot of the mentality monsters. Listen, I always say it's hockey players, toughest guys in the world. I'm not just saying that because you're on your Barney. It's just the absolute truth. Listen to what Ekblad had to go through and still logged unbelievable minutes. Quickly, I want to touch on just this Vegas team. If you were still playing and you had a chance to play under this Vegas team with Bill Foley, George McPhee, Kelly McCrimmon, absolutely all in for this team to win. And if you can go through some of their moves in the histories, you have coaches like Gerard Gallant, their first coach, they canned him. DeBoer, they brought in him, didn't work out. Brought in Bruce Cassidy, always going after the best of the best, making big moves. The Pietrangelo deal. Then they're bringing in Jack Eichel, Mark Stone. These are big moves for a team that wants to win. As a player, how would it feel to play under management that is completely all in to win?
Awesome. And listen, I live in the Ottawa area, so I know Pierre Dorian very well. I know there's a lot of things behind the scenes the last 10 years with Melnick as an owner, and God bless him, passing away. But when you have to deal with the financial restraints and an internal budget rather than a salary cap, that's much harder to do. And it's tough on the fans. It's tough on the players, guys like Mark Stone. You see, go to Vegas, he wins a Stanley Cup. They never wanted to trade him here, but they didn't have the wherewithal financially to keep him, or weren't willing to do it. And that wasn't Pierre. That was ownership. So I know George McPhee. I've known him, God, close to 30 years, about 25 years. Our kids are the same age. They played against each other. They played with each other growing up. So I know George very well. And you're talking about tough. That's maybe pound for pound the toughest guy to ever play in the National Hockey League. And he's ingrained that mentality, not only in his son, but in his teams that he's managed, and the way that he expects his players to play. But the commitment to winning financially from Foley, and the willingness. And again, George McPhee is one of the smartest guys. And to bring in McCrimmon to step down and take the presidency, give it over to someone, hand the keys over to McCrimmon while still having a say, man, there's nothing better as a player knowing your team is willing to do anything financially, player-wise, the way they treat the guys. And in every one of those interviews after, you can look at Jack Eichel, you can look at Mark Stone. It's a privilege to play in Vegas. And I know this from guys that have played there, talking to them, just how well treated they are and how far that goes.
Yeah, it's a real hockey town now. They got a cup, great fans. And one to speak of too is Jack Eichel. Listen, I feel like, the injury was huge. The surgeries were, very risky. It was a risky move for Vegas, but he seemed like it went all flat for him in Buffalo. I mean, just not happy, not making the playoffs. Then he goes over to Vegas and I guess, gets rejuvenated by who he gets to play with and play under, like you're saying.
Well, you're talking Jack Eichel, and he's going to compare. He's a superstar, and he compares himself, and he's always going to be linked to Connor McDavid. Now, Connor McDavid might go down as the greatest player to ever play the game. Statistically, he's never going to touch Gretzky, but he really is going to do some special things, and he will win a cup. So for him, they all have egos. Everyone's got an ego. Everyone wants to be considered the best at what they do, or in that company. And he was starting to get separated from Connor McDavid. I think that really bothered him, not making the playoffs in Buffalo, not being able to be surrounded with enough talent, because they flat out just weren't good enough for the years that he was there. So going to Vegas, that rejuvenates you. And then you go to an organization that's willing to do absolutely anything, believes by what you say in the surgery that you want to have.
Yeah.
So it's been just roses for Jack Eichel. And he was a completely different player this year to maybe the last 3 years that I've seen him play. And a big reason why they're Stanley Cup champions. And now he's got something over Connor McDavid. And I don't think we're ever going to compare him. Is he as good as Connor? I don't think we believe that, or can even make that narrative. But he's got something that this guy, this guy doesn't have, and that's a Stanley Cup. This guy, this guy's got lots of them.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, I think, to some of these players. And listen, he led the team in the regular season with just 66 points, but in the playoffs leads the way, 26 points. So congratulations to Jack Eichel. And we'll have another chance at doing it again next season. The Vegas Golden Knights on Bet99, 12-1 to win the Stanley Cup. What do you think of their chances of repeating next year?
They're going to have some salary cap decisions to make, and they've always made hard decisions. And Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee alluded to that fact that a lot of hard decisions were made, and they have to make them. And that's part of being management. You have to make those decisions. Colorado plus 800. That's who I like. They're going to get Gabriel Landeskog back. Obviously, that was a huge piece of them missing. They had injuries in the playoffs. So I like Colorado. They should be the favorite at plus 800. I'd have Vegas. To me, they just won, and you got to beat them. So they'd be the second favorite for me. Toronto at plus 880.
No,
I don't get it. Then you got Edmonton at plus 900, Boston plus 900, and New Jersey at plus 1100. A good young team. I think that's a little high for them. But Toronto at plus 880, second. We're a Canadian sportsbook, but I don't get it.
Yeah, you got to wait for that number to change. Changed a lot, I think, for the Maple Leafs, who still have a lot to do in the offseason, the draft coming up as well. Okay, that's it for this block. Coming up in the next block, Barney, I got a game we're going to play called What Are the Odds? So I'll leave you with the first one to marinate while we take a little break. And it's What Are the Odds? Aaron Rodgers and the Jets don't work out. I'll let you sit on that one. We're coming up after the break. We're going to play What Are the Odds? Me and Matthew Barnaby.